Добрый день. Салам алейкум. Разрешите начать эту секцию и первым делом представиться. Секцию будут вести два модератора, два сам-модератора. Это Bekhan Chokaev, он представляет ранг X, он здесь занимает целый ряд должностей. Я, честно говоря, уже запутался.
И Magomet Yandiyev, доцент экономического факультета МГУ. Ну, тогда начнем. Уважаемые гости, я рад вас приветствовать на Гайдаровском форуме на секции «Исламские финансы. Проблемы формирования отрасли». Секция по исламским финансам на Гайдаровском форуме уже проходит второй год подряд, что говорит об ее актуальности. В прошлом году мы обсуждали перспективы и возможности, связанные с развитием исламских финансов в России. И если коротко резюмировать итоги прошлой секции, то все участники, выступающие участники, высказали мнение о том, что создание исламского финансового сектора в существующей финансовой системе принесет выгоды для российской экономики. В качестве механизмов, посредством которых это будет достигнуто, были названы включение сбережений той части населения, для которой до этого не было возможности сберегать, привлечение иностранных инвестиций на российские рынки, создание новых финансовых услуг, тем самым диверсификацию
financial services and the diversification of the Russian financial system.
После этого
After that, for a year, the main subject was raised at different levels and very high levels. For example, in June, so the chairman of the central bank met, so the analog of the World Bank. And as a result of these meetings, we started to work in the bodies of state regulation, studying an opportunity to create Islamic financial sector. The State Duma and the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, they've been working on that, and in Tatarstan and Dagestan, so they've been working that. So the goal of today's discussion is to talk about this effort. And we have as guests so the people who are involved in this effort in state authorities and other institutions. I'd like to so Deputy of the State Duma, so Deputy Chairman of the Committee on Financial Markets, Mr. Savelyev. So then Deputy Chairman of Central Bank, Mr. Torshin, as a President of the Fund Development of Islamic Business and Finance, and Advisor of Tatarstan, Nikubov. So Deputy Director of the Department of Financial Policy, Ministry of Finance, Sergei Platonov. So the Master of Linklaters, the Master on mergers and acquisitions. So before we begin our work, so we have a couple of points to make. Colleagues, a year ago, so we had a full house here, and so now today we have a more. The panel is of a better quality now, because we have people who represent different levels of authority, and they have a lot to say. A year ago, actually, in all sincerity, when we spoke about Islamic finance and different models, and so the basic approaches, at that time, so there was very little hope that we would get the ball rolling. But now, this year has passed, and it has displayed a number of very interesting examples. So a number of wonderful events have taken place that we can go back, and based on them, we can talk about the future. so the ice has been broken. So the models that can be really implemented. So first, I wanted to point out that this event, so this action is being held at an institution which is the only one that ordered, paid, and organized so a 2-year grant and study of on the subject of Islamic finance. So they paid for it. And we didn't speak about that last year because there was no reason to talk about that. But now we cannot fail to mention it's a state program, and so within the state, with the state program, so the Islamic finance has been studied thoroughly. So Yuri Danilov, maybe he's not with us, and so this year the research is over, the study is over, but so the practical aspects have been covered. But from the viewpoint of science, will be continued. So Bekhan. So our co-moderator will continue to work on this issue. And so this is very small but very eventful. So event so inspires us with a lot of optimism. And so first, it's an attitude. And so because this is the reason why just we're holding this panel second year running. So besides this study that has been completed, I'd like to point out the efforts of our colleagues from the National Rating Agency, because this institution several years ago, when the Islamic finance was considered as something apprehensive, people were more afraid. And so then, because the ratings of the companies compliance with the requirements of the Sharia, and so they tried, and that's why so they wanted to try the companies to be rated. And so eventually, so the companies, they found logics to set up an expert council. So the expert council that would deal with the issues relating to Islamic finance. So there are no Sharia experts in Russia. So just only a few persons maybe who can do that. So if this industry gets going tomorrow, and so then the Sharia experts, whose opinion is very important, valuable for our investors, foreign investors, there are none. And that is why so we need to create an alternative to the Sharia council. So that will be secular council. So this institution has been set up, and it started to work last year, and last year they even made some decisions. And so, for example, you will have heard that there is an Asian bank. And in April last year, so they declared that they have the whole product line of Islamic finance products. And then, so then they made a decision that it does not, it's not true. So then a similar decision so was related to Halal Invest companies, Islamic product. So that was not actually, it was not real Islamic product as well. So decision has been made vis-a-vis Dariva financial company in Makhachkala. Same decision, same ruling has been made. So Saada company is the most recent example. So the protocol has not been signed, and so there's still no decision. But so to some extent, so this work it's infrastructure to preparing, laying the grounds, infrastructure to prepare the grounds just to set this industry going. And so besides that, so a whole series of so there's a great deal of interest. And when I just move over, just let me. So, okay, so I will stop entertaining you with my. So the most important event that is the bills draft, so related to Islamic finance. So allow me to pass the floor to Deputy of the State Duma, Mr. Savelyev, and ask him to talk about why you decided to deal with it, to be involved in it. What are the prospects? And so could you talk about some bills? And are you going just to continue to work on it, to follow through on this effort, and develop this product? So we have time slot is 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes for discussion. Thank you for each person. So good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues. Why do I have personally? Why do I need it? Why do I need it? Because I started dealing with this issue at the beginning of last year, and I started to work on it very closely. And so no one tried just to deal with this issue, to be involved in this issue before me. and that was the first one in the Duma. And what made me inspired me to do it? Actually, it was something that I started to travel with delegations to the countries of Islamic world. I started to learn more about Islam. And I, within the framework of this committee on financial markets, and I am the deputy chair, and it became obvious for me at a later stage, and many others saw the light, so that the financial sanctions that are working, and so that they have been applied by the European Union and America, so they will last for a long, long period of time. It's absolutely obvious. The writing is on the wall. That's why we need just to look for other sources of financing from other countries, and this is a very so we've been working very seriously on that issue with China, and it is my deep conviction that that the Arab world, the Islamic world, is a white spot. It hasn't been covered. We need to take advantage of that. So we started to develop legislation in this area. And in the summer, actually at the beginning last year, so the first bill was introduced. And so draft bill was introduced. So the idea was to allow the banks to be involved in this kind of activity. So you all know that. Yeah. By the way, I wanted just to add that actually we are working. It's as a partnership banking, because this is a cultural stratum, and so all interested parties, stakeholders, and representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church. So the principles, they are learning about the principles of Christian banking, Islamic banking. So very close. So for example, there's the ban on usury. And so like Russian Orthodox and Islamic finance provides for this ban as well. And so then alcohol, gaming, the same thing, and like Russian Orthodox or Islam. So then the first bill was introduced in the spring, and so then the government response was negative. And so the bank is an institution, it's a financial institution. That was the logic, and it's a financial intermediary. And so there is an experience of the 90s. So when the banking activity was not regulated so thoroughly, and so the banks were kind of playing up and were not always legit. And so the bill is ready, has been submitted, but it didn't go through any hearings yet. And so then in the last year, so I submitted 6 more bills. And so the one that I mentioned now, so we are waiting for the opinion of the government. And besides remembering and seeing so this kind of intensive work on our part, the central bank in their turn, so are beginning to pay more attention, and so then Mr. Torshin has been with us and present at our meetings from the central bank, and so we decided just to set up a group at the central bank just to study the issues of partnership banking. So that's which is a good breakthrough, and it's a good move. And I wanted to point out another thing. So maybe not many are not aware of that. Because conducting Islamic finance, Islamic banking, and adaptation of the Russian legislation to the principles of Islamic banking, it's important from the viewpoint of strengthening our relations with our partners in the Eurasian Union. Because after the signing of creation of the Eurasian Union, so we're trying just to get the unified Eurasian environment from the viewpoint of a bigger market. So Article 7 provides for creating conditions for mutual recognition of licenses in banking, insurance sectors, and then so we need to get protection of rights and laws of the consumption of financial consumers of financial services. services. And remembering that Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, so they do have legislation, and both and the institutions of finance of Islamic finance. So we de facto we are lagging behind. And then besides, so this group that has been set up within the central bank, so then 2 meetings have been, we've gone through the 2 meetings of the expert council of the committee of the financial markets to develop the framework in the area, regulatory framework in the area of Islamic finance. And so we are so enlisting the services of professors. So then the work is underway. And then in response to your question, whether we plan, yes, so 6 bills have been submitted, introduced, and now the next bill we're going just to submit at the end of January. What's important is just to maintain the momentum, to maintain the momentum, not to lose this gathering inertia. But the central bank is not working, so they are very circumspect. So the central bank is which is understandable. So because a very important institution, and so they don't move too fast. And then at the end of the last year. So at the meeting of the work group, so we identified the roadmap, and then the roadmap, it was suggested so that we needed to buy some time to study the issues and analysis. So we have they decided just to allow for 2 years to study the issue. So we don't live forever. So then they decided, so 9 months, no more, because 2 years is too long just to study the basics of the issue. So before September 1st, 2016, just to do all the comparative analysis at the central bank and make a final conclusion and its administration, and then come down to more detailed discussion and of the development of the legislation. Besides what we have been doing as well, because without the central bank, without their positive opinion, so we wouldn't be able certainly to make any progress, if at all. And so this is very briefly, colleagues. So we're not marking time, so we've done a lot. And as I was saying, so we're going to move faster now, and we invite all stakeholders to participate. And we hope that at one way or the other, then 6 bills that have been introduced, and I hope that we'll be able to get through several of them, and at certainly there will be certain response during the hearings, the Duma, and that will certainly allow just to take it further, and so then it will allow just to kind of rattle the cage and just move it into a higher level. So also the draft bill, so that would be worked upon at a later stage. Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any questions? Will you please introduce yourself? When will the first deal will be, Islamic deal in the Russian Federation, approved by the central bank? So optimistic scenario, by compliant with the Islamic banking principles. When do you think the first one will take place? So the central bank says never, yeah, but no. Okay, you'd like to, yes. The Constitution of the Russian Federation, I cannot hear him. Can you tell him to turn on the mic, please? I cannot hear Mr. Torshin. Thank you. And so that we have certainly certain principles how a law is adopted. So we cannot actually just create a law on the basis of one confession, right? Because we have 62 different confessions, different two religions, different two, and people who they actively profess different religions, and we cannot just regulate and manually adjust the law to only one religion. And so when we refer ourselves to the laws of Sharia, and so we need to make changes in the Constitution. So we cannot just adapt it for the convenience of one religion. And so, for example, so then we have Georgia. So the main religion is Orthodoxy. We don't have it. Because we don't have the only religion, and so we can say that Russia has only one religion, which is Orthodoxy. That's not true. So we need just to look at it but do we need just to change any legislation right now? Maybe the functioning legislation will be sufficient, and that from talks to start doing business already. Yeah, maybe the existing legislation will be sufficient. So about the sufficiency or insufficiency of the current legislation, we'll ask Binar Yakubov, who's done a lot of work on that. So anyone else wants to say anything? The question you spoke about the sanctions, financial university, the government of the Russian Federation. So then the sanctions, the policy of sanctions, and the sanctions war, the war of sanctions. So I just go over these sanctions and the list and the grants. So the ministry. So it's not supported financially. How can? Then about the sanctions, the war of sanctions. So what? Okay, let's rephrase your question. So who among you, the bankers, ready to provide the grant to do this research, to do this study? Who? Are the present bankers here? So then the war of sanctions and attracting Islamic finance, raising Islamic banking institutions, assets, money, and the central bank. Question to the central bank: can the central bank do anything about? Can I continue? With regards to grants, I unfortunately we are not distributing any grants. We work with unfortunately with our own efforts, and so we are doing it. So we enlist the services of experts, and we work in this area. We develop legislation, regulatory framework, and we attract very important, prominent lawyers. People help us, but they're not asking questions about grants. But I understand what you mean. Because it's true that that it costs. So there is a lot of investment that needs, and the financial support is required. But so then to the extent of Islamic finance plane, so it's not there yet. But it's true that we need to start thinking about raising this issue concerning grants. So that certainly would help us to do a proper study. So in the context of anti-sanction policy. Any more questions, please?
Yes, I do.
I have a question too.
Good evening, everybody. My question will be in English. I'm sorry, my Russian is not up to that much extent. It's interesting for me to ask.
I'm sorry, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mohammed Yunus. I'm coming from United Arab Emirates. I work for Dubai Islamic Insurance and Reinsurance Company. My question is, or my wonder, that about more than 7 or 10 years ago, actually, when the world started moving towards when the idea of Islamic finance appeared, especially in the Muslim countries, and the international banks like HSBC, like Standard Chartered Bank, and all the international players, whether Americans or Europeans, they react immediately, and they created immediately Islamic arm to cover the Islamic banks which came up out of regular banks, let's say. Whoever was having a regular bank, when they find the need in their market, they created immediately an arm to cover this area. So it's a kind of application, let's say. Immediately, the international banks, they reacted towards this, and they created umbrella to cover this kind of banks, and they created also this arm to start also functioning in the Middle East and in the Islamic countries as well. Interesting why Russia is so much behind these banks, number one. Number two, when we are talking about banking industry, is it also we are talking about the Islamic insurance as well in Russia, or it's only banking as well without Islamic insurance? And for me, it's kind of application, like you created a new application in the computer and using it, so like the others doing in the world. And thank you so much.
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. So I'll try to answer your question. So the bills are there. So that's because we're going just to try to make changes in the legislation, insurance legislation as well. So we're working on that. So insurance, so Islamic insurance component, we're working on it as well. That's number one. Yes, we're behind. It's true that we are far behind, globally behind. So even our closest neighbors, Kazakhstan, so they spoke about big progress. So there's a new project in their capital, so creating a financial center, Islamic financial center, and so the big branch of Islamic financing will be part of this new financial center in Kazakhstan. And our country is quite large, and sometimes it's kind of cumbersome, and we move slowly. But I can assure you that we have this understanding of the importance of taking care of this issue. Some people still have doubts, but eventually it will get great through. So because then the European, so certainly it will be a long time before. So we really need just to pay much more attention to it, and so I think that we got the ball rolling, and so then certainly the world eventually will change. But within the framework of this paradigm, Russia is gaining ground. So Russia is getting more powerful militarily, is getting more powerful economically, and is getting more independent. And I've visited in Tehran several times, and I see how the Western sanctions impact, how badly they impact, how adversely they impact their economy. So even the SWIFT banking system doesn't work there. So I know how adverse, how heavy these sanctions are for Iran. So we can see how badly they feel, and that is why we need to get ready. We need to be perseverant, and we need certainly to speed up our effort, and we need just to to develop the legislation and approve this new legislation, and we have this understanding. Anyway, so I'm deeply convinced that we do have those territories of accelerated development, right, advanced development, and so we can actually talk about. So we can just vis-a-vis, we can apply it to use the same method. So there's to apply the accelerated method of development and to pay more attention to the Islamic banking and Islamic finance issues, and so we can make a trial balloon, for example, to try to create a branch of this financial system somewhere in one of the territories of accelerated development, and then see how it works, and then follow through on that, so we can see how it works, and if the experience is good, the results are good, so we can, but certainly we need to speed up our effort. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to specify about the difference between Islamic and Orthodox banking, because I heard that there are even some rules of Christian Orthodox banking being implemented. Is that right? Well, the difference is very small. It's very similar. The main ban is on this activity, on some investment, on investment into some very similar. But again, here, as a state official, I need to create a prerequisites for investments coming into Russia, and the volume of Islamic finance globally is evaluated around $2 trillion. So there is something to consider. And 2 years ago in Azerbaijan, which is a self-sufficient state, in the state bank, they arranged a department, and it took them 2 years to attract $700 million of investment. I'm sure we could update the legislation and attract dozens of millions of dollars. So let's stick to the agenda after the presentation. Please, I can allow only 1 or 2 questions, and if we have enough time, then we could allow more time for Q&A. I have a question too. So let us start the next presentation from the Fund of Islamic Business Development. Could you please turn on the presentation? Yeah, good night. Good afternoon. Yes, that's true, dear colleagues and partners. It's my second time at this Gaidar Forum. And this is a special session, and I hope for the first time it was a kind of a testing ground, a pilot, and the second time is quite serious, and after the third time it may become a traditional event. Well, I won't be telling about all this that we have on the slide, but okay, good. Look, what do we have in the Islamic finance in Russia? That's true. Islamic finance have nothing to do with sanctions, because the Islamic finance have been in existence at least for the last 14 years in Russia. And there are colleagues who probably have been doing it for the last 20 years. And for Russia, and especially some Islamic circles, Islamic finance has always been attractive, because this is a permitted mechanism of developing business and economics from the point of view of Muslim population. And let me point out that even without being Muslims, people actually have very good impression about the Islamic banking. Many people have been working hard. In 2010, I remember we have introduced a new roadmap of development of Islamic banking in Russia. Last year, I said that there are always 2 approaches. First approach is from top down, when they just order to do something, and then people do according to the order, then legislation department and banks start working. And then after some practices mature, and after this at a certain stage of maturity, they turn into something that requires legislation and causes causes the new environment. So I guess in Russia we are witnessing the second way. Over the last 5 years, we understand that we have created certain customs, investment leasing companies and financial houses. And we can say now that Definitely there are legislative restrictions, and today Islamic financial products unfortunately cannot be competitive in the market because of the current legislation, because of double taxation and many other issues that prevent them from being competitive. But still, Muslims and sometimes even non-Muslims go for it. But so far, we understand there will be no breakthrough unless we study and facilitate the subject through different working groups and other tools that we now have in the Council, Federation, and under the Central Bank, Sberbank, and the government of Tatarstan, and many other working groups that we have. So they speak about the same matters. They understand that that's something that has to be done. Resources should be available. And you were talking about the grants and other things. Unfortunately, it is another indicator. There's no company, no one in Russia, no agency that invested seriously. But within a collaboration with our Malaysian partners and Malaysian companies, last year, in 2015, we managed to convince others that we need to do the feasibility study, to involve experts and to do complete survey of the market and show what kind of changes and should we develop the Islamic finance the way they are developing in other countries, or probably we should have some special approach in Russia. And Malaysian government supported us. They issued a grant by the government, Malaysian government, and signed an agreement between the country, the Malaysia and Tatarstan, set up a consortium. And our fund joined one of the leading Malaysian universities and Central Bank of Malaysia, one of the departments. So in April, a special agreement has been signed, and we started working on a feasibility study of opening Islamic Bank in Tatarstan as a pilot project for Islamic finance in Russia. So this feasibility study took 9 months to complete, and in December it was submitted to the Tatarstan government, and we had samples. We sent samples to federal structures. We are grateful to the Bank of Russia, and in October we had hearings about this feasibility study in the Central Bank of Russia, and then we had hearings in different ministries and regional and federal ministries, and the final results were discussed at the round table in Moscow, in the Moscow Golf Club. And the document, what is it? As I told you, it's 400 pages. It's many hours of different types of research, and on the Islamic banking, insurance, leasing companies, financial companies, and the changes that have to be made in the legislation. But before we started, definitely we embarked on the marketing research, and we would study over 1,000 respondents, and so many questions were asked, and we were asking them about the proper positioning and the brands. And for most of the people in Russia, by the way, the ratio is non-Muslims prevailed. And when people think about Islamic banking, they think it's social banking. So it was branded as a socially oriented bank. then as an Islamic participation partnership, and then ethical bank. Over half of the respondents are sure that Islamic banks will be successful, and they expect that those Islamic banking products will be more available, affordable, and profitable. And many people would be ready to become clients even if the products are more expensive, but definitely because of religious considerations. So we would look at different aspects of it. We would consider setting up separate Islamic banks, or creating departments in existing banks. So the recommendation is a department in a large traditional bank is an important way, so it will make Islamic banking easy to control the process properly, to avoid mistakes, attract circles of population through the reputation, and overcome the mistrust to the banking system by population. And the state support is necessary to ensure equal playing field and tax neutrality. There were many people who were saying that absolutely new Islamic banks will become will create competition. So we can always eliminate this competitive issue, because the Sberbank or other leading banks may set up kind of Islamic banking windows. They just extend their product line and introduce and involve the new types of population who are not using traditional banking services because of for religious or other ethical reasons. So the main difficulties in Russia. We studied the main obstacles, made recommendations, and there are two options. First, to set up a new law on Islamic banks, and the second is to introduce changes into the current legislation. So again, the recommendation is to follow the second way, to change or add some items into the existing legislation, the way it was made in the UK. The Civil Code has an article about the loan agreement, about the interest rate, then the deposits, and the federal law on banks and banking activities. From the first article, and the Russian, I guess I have 1 minute, even less. So within the necessary changes in legislation, so our colleagues from the State Duma are now addressing it. I thought that it was only 5 initiatives, but actually it's 6. We are behind our colleagues, so easy procedure of registration, title on transactions, and other things, separate accounting for Islamic banking, so special investment accounts, and other things. So taxation, optimization of taxation, special operations, and warehouse receipts handling. So my time is up. Here's the document, which writes everything accurately. I'm not saying that this is the latest, or the final release, but at least we have this document as a basis for for this activity. And then it's up to experts from different ministries and banking organizations, from associations and colleagues and law firms, auditors. So it's up to you, gentlemen, to study, to criticize, and all the necessary changes that Russia needs for the launch of finance is here. And it's up to the government, to the central bank, and other participants to define the way we shall use. And so there is a working group under the Central Bank of Russia, and we have a roadmap and financial services for the period of 2016 to 2018. And this is a very detailed document. We would be talking generalities. We would say that we need Islamic banking because they open the way and so on. But now we have we stopped, appealing, and now we have switched to practical work. The way we are going to proceed depends on specific terms. So Islamic banking depends on the client's environment and on religion as a social instrument, how it's going to prevail. We are not saying that the Islamic banking today is going to open, but still, if we walk fast, we shall need at least a year or two. And in this roadmap, we say that this pilot region for the first launch of Islamic banking products is going to happen in Tatarstan. With all my respect to colleagues from other regions, I believe that Tatarstan is the best site and the most mature in terms of government structure and banking and business environment and the consumers. And we really hope that everything we have written in this feasibility study will be properly studied, and we're not going to keep this document in a drawer. If you are interested, if you want to read it, it's in public access at our website. You can look at this at the picture, and there is a special questionnaire. You fill it in, and there will be a personal link which invites you to study this document. I suggest you study and support everything you like and criticize everything you dislike, and then make your proposals at different sites. And inshallah, we have this Islamic finance and Islamic product that will start working properly. And what we have been saying today, we don't need to set up special conditions to Islamic banks or Islamic financial institutes. We say, let's create a level playing field for them to function. It does not mean that Islamic banks should be governed by the effective legislation. But we need to consider the specifics, economic and financial, introduce the changes that will allow those companies to work in a proper manner within the current legislation. So I thank you very much, and I want to add a couple of words. So the group has made extensive work, and in this institute we had a conference on with approximately 60 Malaysian experts, professors, doctors, discussing a number of matters about the topic in Russia, and so the Council of Mufti supported it, and So that was very important. I wanted to ask a question. So you have already done this feasibility study, and you have mentioned all the laws that require changes. Once everything is done, so will it mean that all the regions, not just Tatarstan, can do the same thing? So will this experience be copied? Will there be this kind of Islamic window for banking? That's exactly what we have written in the roadmap. Why are we saying that there should be a pilot site? Not just to make Tatarstan unique, no. But today, very many projects first are tested in Tatarstan, and in case of success, they spread across other regions. And again, in order to introduce Islamic finance, we need understanding from the regulator and the consumer. And it's impossible in this large country to introduce everything overnight and start monitoring. So it means that we have to start small, with 1 or 2 banks working for 1 or 2 years. And finally, when the regulator gains some experience, we can move it on. The philosophy is very simple. Try, and if it feels good, then immediately distribute across Russia. Where shall we understand? How do we understand that a pilot always means? Why Tatarstan? Because a pilot means that temporarily there will be some exceptions for some projects. As soon as we have some experience, we shall make the necessary changes, introduce the necessary changes into the legislation, and then it will become proper business practices. We really hope to get your support, but actually there is no need to create understanding of the usefulness of this. So last year we had some colleagues who would stand up and start asking about the difference between Islamic and non-Islamic banking. I don't want today to talk about it. All you need to know about Islamic banking is available in Russia. So you can always find the information about this. Is not exactly restricted knowledge. Very many people know it's all available. So the information is available. The Mufti Council has lots of information, informative materials, and the website. There is much information, and the interest is there. And the legislator and the federal mass media, definitely our Duma colleagues, I thank you for the kind words, and indeed I wanted to respond. To thank you for your many years of efforts. That's why Tatarstan is a priority site for the new project. And as for our colleagues, it's a very important question. Why so slow? I will tell you. When Malaysian colleagues came to discuss the roadmap in the central bank, I told Malaysian bankers, friends, we may keep going forever, and it's necessary, it's important. Take several $1 million. Come to a Russian bank. Open an Islamic window, because that's what you can do now. It may be in a basic form first, but the active legislation, the effective legislation allows you to do so. We need to try first. You may keep walking around, talking, walking and talking, but it's not the talk, but it's the walk, walk the walk. So we need to act now. And we need the partner countries to get involved so that our legislative and executive authorities would help us. Allow me to pass the floor for the question. So first, Yuri Danilov joined us. He's head of this scientific project on Islamic finance. If you have questions, he's the person to ask. Then Ahmed Palankoev, the senator who represents Russia in relations with many Arabic countries. We have a colleague with Dagestan, Said Saidov, who supervises Islamic finance in the government. Then Madina Kalimulina from the Mufti Council. Yeah, there's nothing to add. You all know her. And Andrei Zhuravlev, a scientist of Arabic culture and languages. He's a prominent scientist. I thank you. So let me comment quickly. In terms of incorporating Islamic finance into the secular legislation, I believe we should actually target the French, not the Anglo-Saxon system of law. So Madame Lagarde, who monitors it, is doing approximately the same. So now the question from me. In 2012, let me rain on your parade a little bit. In 2012, I was getting ready for a conference and about the status and the outlook of Islamic finance in Russia. And I calculated and you can extrapolate the Islamic finance for the businesses, but very difficult for the population. We have 1 million of households, potential households, and real users who would be ready to use Islamic finance. And there was another poll that we have been studying, and I saw some feasibility studies, some preparatory materials, and the methodology with the same result. Islamic window of a bank. Well, you should know the results. It's clear that the results were not very encouraging. So why? It may happen, and I would like to find out what is 30% of the 1,000 people who were polled. It's
and how do we interpret the results? So my question has to do, I'm afraid that it might happen that as a result, so then the state will certainly be involved and will build this beautiful edifice of Islamic banking that will be a stillborn institution and won't work. So thank you for the question. And some of our colleagues always just have it as an ace up their sleeve, and I've heard it several times. And certainly we can talk about the past, but we live for the future, and this is the first point. Second point, anything that has to do with the study, with the research, and I will give you this personal link. And I'm not going to give you the book, so it's my book. I just want to show it to you, but I'm not sharing it. But I'll give you a link. And so all the details of all the polls, you will be able to get acquainted with it. And there's all the hearings, all the research. So their study was very perfunctory. They scratched the surface because the work which is done now by the financial institutions in Kazan, in Dagestan, in Makhachkala, in many other areas. So the queries that business has been making, so vis-a-vis this type of financing, now it's a completely different numbers, different statistics that we had 3-5 years ago. Completely different. The level of interest has gone so then the financial situation certainly helps to forward it much faster. So lots of respondents, many people, so because they say that's a social bank, that's what they say first, and that's the main strength. So that's a bank that you can go and just and borrow some money, but my friends will prove what I'm saying, that in spite of the funding problems, financing problems, so they have a lot of clients. So in spite of the fact that their products are much more expensive than traditional banking products, still there are lots of clients, lots of customers. Okay, so if to be brief, just read the book, everything is in there. So and then taking advantage of my presence here, I would like to say that traditionally starting from 2009 in Kazan, we have been having this Kazan summit. So now it's just it's scheduled now for May 2016. So this Kazan summit, regular meeting, so once a year. So and in Moscow, March the 15th, in the Renaissance Monarch Hotel. So there will be held another event, so IFCNS Russian Forum. So this year. So the first event, so from a whole, so many of these events in 23 countries, so they have held these events, and March 15, so this event will be held in Moscow. So we'll have the leading specialists will gather for that event. So there's the IFNCS Russia site forum. This web site exists. So March 15, I invite you all. So there'll be a lot of foreign participants. So the people who are not afraid of this information environment vis-a-vis Russia, and so that exists outside Russia. So they're not afraid of this information environment. They still come to Russia, and then so they're very keen on trying to develop and look at every opportunity just to create this Islamic finance. And we expect about 500 people coming, and so we'll talk about specific steps. So at different working groups, and an expert council has been set up for this event already. And our leading banks will be participating, and Mr. Savelyev, many other colleagues will participate. So we expect you all there in March, but in May I hope we'll meet in Kazan for the Kazan summit. Thank you. So okay, one more question, and then we'll continue. One brief question, brief answer. Islam. So there is if I hear right, because I can't hear right. So there is a magazine of the Council of Muftis of Russia, and so there is no need to talk to promote Islamic finance, because we know that it's needed, but it's, after all, at the end of the day, it's a Sharia law. So the banks should be Sharia law compliant if they are to be engaged in Islamic finance. Then Islamic identity. So that's another issue that is very high on the agenda, because many republics have a prevalence of Muslims, of Islamic religion people. And this is why aren't there any risks for the Russian identity, for other nations' identity, if they start talking about the Sharia banking principles, Sharia banking law, compliant? So for example, this idea, certainly your initiative just opened the door to the financial world of Islamic finance. It might scare people, and so for example, Turkey hit us in the back, and it's maybe that there will be this competitive environment, and the political agenda will become very important. So this prevalence of political agenda might be counterproductive for the Islamic finance development. I think so Islamic banking, Islamic finance, so they like to mix it with religious things, with politics. So they mix them up, and the Sunni, the Shia, and so they just start talking about things. But at the end of the day, it's not true. We need to look at it very pragmatically, because this is an economic instrument. This is economics. That's it. This is economics. When we talk about identity, I'm a Muslim, for example. I think it won't work. It will not be detrimental, because there are statistics in many countries where more than 50% of the clients of Islamic banking, they're not Muslims even, but they're clients of Muslim finance. And so many countries where the banking exists, so they're not Muslims. And even the heads of financial institutions of Islamic banking institutions, they're not Muslims too. So the management may not be Muslims. And but we need to abandon those unnecessary fabrications, plottings, machinations, and we need just to look at it only from the economic viewpoint. It's economics, pure economics, and then we won't have such problems. And that's exactly what I appeal to you. Because I appeal to our Muslim colleagues to think that Islamic banking is only for Muslims. This is not true. It's for everyone. It's for everyone. That's true. And that's my point. And I don't think that we'll have any problems with that. And so we don't want any excessive speculations, so contrived ideas. We don't want. So that's why we want just to set up this pilot site, because to try it out, to see, and if it works, so then we can already expand it in the territory of our great country. That's it. Thank you, Linar. So our next speaker, Sergey Platonov, Deputy Director, Department of Minister of Finance. Good afternoon. I would, so let's Islamic finance. So let's not look at it as one of alternative ways to raise financing. And that's connected to sanctions. The traditional sources of financing were stopped, and it is true. You said at the federal level, so this subject is being discussed, and it's about a year only. So they've been discussing it, but it's true that but for about 10 years, so they've been talking about it. But in general, talking about that, but more closely 1 year. And in this respect, so we cannot we cannot view even what Linar was saying about the pilot project. I would recommend. I want to see the position of the federal authorities, because we are a secular state, so we have one legislation for all. Equally applicable, and we cannot just form a legislation and adjust it to one, even if a multitudinous, very important group, but it's one of many confessions that exist, and we cannot adjust and create and handmade institution. So that is why we cannot do that, and so that's why we're at the initial stage, and so the federal authorities need to provide their opinion. Terminology is important, because if we go deeper and try this to to understand the terms and definitions of Islamic banking, Islamic finance, and our current legislation, vis-à-vis our current legislation. So many financial instruments exist within the framework of the existing. They're called differently, but they exist. But when this pilot project gets underway, if it does not contradict, if this doesn't contradict the federal legislation, so then we'll see how much money has been raised, will it work or not. So if it does not contradict, but if we just raise money from the domestic market, so we won't stand to gain anything. So we need just to even talk about international markets. So then raising money would be good. So let's see if they're not contradicting. So this pilot project, how much money it will raise? Will it fly or not? And that's it. So we'll appreciate more information about that. And so this is an important issue. I agree, it's pertinent and very relevant, and it evolves very rapidly. And so several years, this federal legislation. So we resolved all issues. So the banking activity law works, and several years ago it was adopted, approved, and so the working groups are working, and we are discussing these issues. But this is the first step, and so we are ready to move forward, but in a circumspect, cautious manner. So then the Eurasian environment. And so eventually, the Russian Federation will have to harmonize the legislation, including with our colleagues from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzia, because it's Eurasian space, because they have experience. I mean, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzia, and that we can capitalize on. And so we'll see what strengths and weaknesses this Islamic banking has, and what instruments will be in demand. And technical issue, when jointly with the Bank of Russia, and from the viewpoint of the implementation of these ideas and approaches, in my view, it's important to pay attention to the fact that, unfortunately, in Islamic banking, as it is different from other activities, there are no international standards in Islamic banking. No international standards. So there are some successful, less or more successful examples that cover certain line of products, financial products, but local for each country. And mostly those are the countries where Islam is the state religion. And for Russia, Islam is not a state religion, so we cannot borrow this example blindly. Or the standards of auditing of audit companies that operate in different local markets. So as an example, as an experience is very important. As a talking point, it's important, but application, so we need just to do a lot of export work and try to adjust it to the Russian reality. This is very important. Eventually, we'll just run up into this problem, against this problem. So, because the ideas of practical implementation might be quite challenging. Regarding another technical challenge, because we torpedoed this product. Because the government position, it's a principally important government position, because and the experience of the 90s, so we learned a good lesson, because the banking activity, so that requires special regulation, special oversight, and the credit organizations should not be involved in trading, so which goes counter to the principles of Islamic finance. Probably they could be compromised, but we learned this lesson in the 90s, and so the existing legislation does not give us grounds to think that this was an erroneous position, and that was a mistake. And so maybe the deputies look at it differently, but the government has already spoken on this position, and we are ready to participate in the working groups and also be involved in the development of certain changes in the legislation. I would support so the Linar's position to the extent that it's not realistic to develop a specific law. It makes no sense to develop a specific law because it means that we have to make amendments to a huge number of other laws, and but a pilot activity, pilot effort that could be done within the existing legislation, and discussing the positions that need to be changed in the federal law. This could be a good subject matter to consider, and could be the target of our effort for the next coming years, for several coming years, and so then practical application attempts to make this pilot study. Don't speak without the mic, please, because it's recording is going on. Colleagues, first thing I want to mention, that's exactly the way we're proceeding, and so that's changing. So we're not offering any global laws changes. So everything can be pinpoint changes that can bring it all in compliance with the laws. A colleague from the Ministry of Finance was saying that is not related to sanctions, has nothing to do with sanctions, and so it's this subject has been around for many years. I mean, Islamic banking. This is true. Yeah, so that proves that I'm right. Yeah, but I'd like to remind you that in during those fat years where there were no sanctions, and so it was great oil price, and the economy, the economic department of the government felt very well. So if I had come to you with this question, to the central bank, if I had approached you at that time, so they would say, so why do we need that? So we have great. So look, lots of American money, lots of European money, international investments, European. So what kind of Islamic banking? So forget about it. That's what I would have been told if I had been there at that time. And but we do have some specialists like Linar who are promoting and developing this. So it's great that we have such specialists. But so it's directly connected. So we need to think fast. We need to use our brains. We need to think fast. How to raise money. I have given you this Azerbaijan. So 2 years, $700 million. And so, but if you compare the size of our economy, so you can see that it's pro rata increase. And so this is long money. This is long money for infrastructural projects. And it's exactly what Russia is hurting for right now. Okay. Question. I would like to comment the demand, the domestic demand for these financial products. Let me, I beg to differ, because many don't use the existing financial instruments as investment vehicles. But for me and many people I know, so the only opportunity is so unit investment funds. That's where we can invest, and but they are not. So the capital markets is in a deplorable state, and so there are some Islamic institutions, also investment financing groups, etc. They allow to invest the available money, and so that is why. So the only vehicle that we can invest is Islamic finance, and we can get good returns on our investments. But these products are not available for all. A domestic demand, and very difficult just to raise money without the exodus of money and the use of other instruments. So there's a danger, because there's capital flight is great, and so money is leaving the country, and that is why we need to. So there are more challenges than there are solutions. And the second, international standards. So you touched upon this issue, since we, on behalf of the Council of Muftis of Russia and the Association of Experts on Islamic Finance, so we are translating the standards into Russian, and the share standards into Russian. that the Islamic financial institutions use and apply in the world. And so then IOFI, so audit Islamic financial institutions, standards committee, more than 400 organizations. So we are just busy translating. And so these standards are used by Russian and Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan companies. These standards exist. And so there are several groups. The Share standards exist. So there are some framework standards. And then there are standards of accounting, reporting as well, very important for Russia as well, because the system differs greatly. And then so there are several sets of standards. So the point is that these standards they keep changing because the market is changing. So new issues are raised, and so some products change, amendments. So because it's all in flux, it's changing, it's normal. And so then there was a change last year. So then 54 standards, 13 standards were amended last year, for example. So it's all in flux. Thank you. The mic, please. Can you give the mic to that lady in the corner? Gazprom Bank. You mentioned that raising raising money outside Russia is much better than domestic raising of money, and it's much more attractive, better than investment instruments, better come abroad. And this year it was proclaimed that Ministry of Finance plans to issue bonds at Moscow Exchange. Our Minister of Finance, Kazakhstan, our Russian Minister of Finance, planning just to make an issue, of bonds denominated in RMBs. To what extent we can issue bonds in the form of something? I didn't get it. In the form of super, and are there any restrictions to issue offshore Sapuka for Russian banks? Can I forward this question to another speaker who would answer it more professionally at the end of my presentation? Any more questions? Okay. Please. Hamzat is involved in these issues professionally, so he'll give us an example and answer a question simultaneously. So we consulted the government of Great Britain about Sapuka in 2014. Внешэконом Bank about the raising international equity. Внешэконом Bank. So this now is currently scrutinizing the opportunities to go into the financial Islamic finance instruments and some strategic approaches, etc. It is true that I want just to support the assumption that international investment is very important for us, because the deals in Russia, Azerbaijan that have been made. So it's only 1 or 2 years, but we need long money. 1-2 years is not enough. So we need just to replace American equity, for example. And SUPU is long money, a source of long money. And SUPU, and to get SUPU, we need to make changes in the tax legislation. Because our original negotiations, even we forget about sanctions, then certainly the Middle East investors are very much concerned about the sanctions existing in Russia now against Russia, and so then still there are some partners who are just scrutinizing the situation, and they are quite loyal and they're interested in moving forward. But in order to implement institutions that would be of interest to them, so we need to address tax issues. Because any trade, any asset, so we can certainly make some short deals, short trades, but it's only short money. But we need just long money, and physically, so many changes need to be done. Okay, that was a comment. Okay, good, colleagues. So let's move over to the next speaker, please. Hamzat, who is going to speak now? Who's next? Okay, maybe you will recap a little bit later, right? We'll ask you to do that. Okay, but I came to listen too rather than to speak. Okay, now I can do a recap, no problem. So the moderator will do the Hamzat Asabayev, please. Hamzat Asabayev, please. Okay, presentation, please. Would you like to speak sitting or just you want to go to the podium? I came from London for this meeting, and he is a lawyer, international law firm that consulted so the trades on the issuance of sukuk and suku, and so he will talk about suku, the issuance of suku, and legislation of Great Britain. Can we compare British legislation, Russian legislation, and how it's all related. So thank you for the presentation. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me? Okay. Financing in compliance with the Islamic principles. I agree with the previous speakers that we do have lots of regulatory hurdles and problems, and that in Russia we cannot use Islamic banking in full, which is not possible. Many barriers in the way, but in order just to use Islamic banking in Russia, at the same time, we need to admit that very important component of our economy is just raising international financing. And and I think that we do have good options, good opportunities to raise international financing along the lines that do not go counter to the Islamic principles, and so there are many opportunities concerning that. If you look at the slide, as you can see, the largest deals that took place in Russia, so with the participation of Russian companies, you can see them all, Rosneft, Mitchell. As it was said, so financing of all these companies, on the left side, American, European banks, Asian banks participated in those financing, famous names. So then on the right-hand side, the largest finance deals as well, so the most recent in the last 2 years. So what's in common?
So speaking about the Anglo-Saxon law, the British law, all these deals were done under the British law. So why is it important? And I believe that and I expect that we can use the British law in Russia and the structures that the Russian bankers applied to attract money from international market. If we take a Lego, we can build both a fence, a bridge, a plant. And in these transactions, on the right, on the left, we have huge number of main elements that match. And the legal protection and the guarantee and different ways to mitigate the risks. I'll tell you about it later. And I focus my presentation. I'm sorry, I'm rushing. On two products that might be of interest to Russian companies or Russian players who can attract investment in Russia. That's Murabaha and Sukuk. I guess you all know what it is and what it means. If we look at Murabaha, the difference of credit financing from, we all know what is, we get the money, what's credit, we use the money for constructing or buying something, and Murabaha has the same economics. For instance, we want to buy a plane or a tank. We came to an Islamic bank that can be located in Dubai, in London, in Singapore. We approach them and ask them to buy a tanker or a plane, whatever we want to get. The bank will buy and then resell to us at a premium. We all know this premium. Moreover, the premium that bank will include in the contract also considers LIBOR and benchmark. So it is the same, quantitatively the same percentage, but it's structured in such a way that the whole deal is made under Islamic principles. So as Islamic Institute buys the assets, the risks appear. You heard much criticism about expensive Islamic banking. Yes, it is much more. It is indeed more expensive than the other institutes that we know from Americans, from European, because in this case, Islamic bank bears risks. Yes, most probably. The bankers know better the economic component. So if in good times we could attract from syndicates under 2 to 3% without any protection, standard Murabaha may mean 6 or 7%. But I believe that my financing colleagues may correct me if I'm wrong. But still, coming back to the British law, there are tools. That's why British law is used across the globe. 90% of the largest transactions are made under the British law to minimize the risks, and the bankers will confirm. The less risk you have, the less cost the money have. And let me tell you about the ways to use and to find more democratic premium. Let's call it not interest rate, but premium. Again, Sukuk, you know what's the main difference between Sukuk and main risks, and Sukuk actually is a liability. Unlike the Eurobonds or Eurobonds, it's the title, the right to get some remuneration. But a bond is a debt. And answering my Gazprom colleague's question, how we can use Sukuk, what are the main issues that we see with the application in Russia is that Sukuk holder, the buyer of the certificate, under Russian law, especially for the real estate, cannot be an owner, cannot have the title, cannot be a co-owner. But again, the global financing practices, the British law, the Russian options in banks and institutions exist and allow to structure Sukuk in such a way through probably the collaboration. If it is real estate, and I'll tell you what the British government has done. It's not real estate that was asset, but the short-term rental rights. So if we use them as an asset, it allows us to kind of bypass, at least not to worry too much about this formal thing, that the owner should be registered. So theoretically, we can do it. The question is, again, I agree to all the speakers that so far there's no demand. And our guest was asking about HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Citibank that they have, and Islamic windows. Yes, let me tell you that Внешэкономбанк, Sberbank, Gazprom Bank, VTB, all those institutions have people who are trying somehow to use the Islamic concept for financing. And the question is, so far there is no demand. Most probably people for the first largest serious deals of Islamic finance in Russia, like Murabba require a serious organization that can talk to Islamic institutions. That's one thing. Negotiations. That's a very sensitive thing, and it's expensive. So Islamic finance money still is more expensive than ordinary banking. So let's imagine a Russian borrower, a Russian company wants to raise money, and in 2006, one of the largest Russian corporations turned to international lawyers to purchase expensive equipment to work in mining. They did not use this financing, though the lawyers and bankers, Russian lawyers and bankers confirmed that they could. They see no violation of the Russian law. They never used this tool because the financing was more expensive. So practically, how is it going to happen? Yes, VTB is one of the cases who tried, but then dropped it because it turned out more expensive. We would analyze for another company. I cannot name them. I have no right to name them. Not permitted. Yes. Yes, it's a public company, a very serious company. So, again, please stop saying that the financing is more expensive, more expensive, more expensive, more expensive. Don't. It's more expensive than what? So every serious bank has a Sharia board that would analyze the structure for compliance. Lawyers, financiers bring a memorandum with to this council, and Islamic scientists who expert in Sharia, and they would study and say, yes, that's what we can do. After that, the lawyers and auditors would prepare the final documentation and bring it to the council. And HSBC, Citi have it. All the largest players have it. And I repeat it because the scientists understand perfectly what we want to show. They understand the structure, commercial components. You can talk to them. After the fatwa was made, you can start financing, and it will be in full compliance with Islam. So again, the British law, and you can see this caveat about the applicability of the British law, and then arbitration, London, Paris. And the most important, if you have a minute, I believe it's important for you. Why I kept saying that it is more expensive? Because there are risks. The bank bears the risk. The buyer who came and who doesn't know what he's going to buy, because it's bank who will do it on behalf of him. So the first risk we have this undertaking. So it means your initial seller who sold you under Muramaha, he commits that if the customer doesn't buy out at a premium, this initial person will buy it back from the bank, and you could demand compliance. Then warranty is the most important thing. In Russia, we know it that in the civil law, usually it's used in the British law. It means that a person who sells you a tanker or a plane, he says that it's legally clean, that it has all the wherewithal, all the necessary things. And so if you're unhappy, you go back to him, he will be responsible for it. And then Sukuk and Murabaha use this buyback obligation and then indemnity to compensate for any losses, which is extremely important for Sukuk, and that's the tax indemnity when a buyer or an issuer will commit to compensate all the law that if the Federal Tax Services of Russia comes to you. So again, it's trying to reduce the premium. The more you include different protection tools, guarantees, than other tools, the easier it will be for you to talk to bank and reduce it. And then taxes, special terminology, fines, early repayment discount. But again, with Murabaha, formally you are not getting any discount if you have early payment. But again, it's the custom already, and FETVA allows a special tool to use it. And again, syndication and structures. The Western and Islamic Bank can finance expensive projects together because billions of dollars projects where different finance, combined finance works. For instance, take Aston Martin with the cost of $500 million, 300 million came from America and 200 from Islam. And again, the scientists said that this is the pool that can be used. So again, when the people come in the early 90s, when this financing only appeared or was born, so many FETVAs said it's better to close an imperfect transaction now than wait until we can make it perfect. So this kind of the need. But today, in 2015, all those tools and mechanisms have been quite polished quite well. It's all known, and FETVA scientists have FETVA structures, documents. So we are looking for the demand from the Russian companies who will come to the Arabic institutes and say that they want to attract Sharia money. And I shall agree to Dmitry that all these sanctions and situation, most probably we shall turn to banks. That's right. Thank you. Let me try to add something. What is Sukuk market today? It's approximately $150 million every year. What are the costs today? Approximately 3.5%. For Russian companies and corporations who wanted to venture into this market is approximately 6.57%. Because, well, there is no benchmark, and traditional system, Sukuk system, when a party comes out and starts working. So first you make this sovereign Sukuk. When the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury and the state borrows at international markets and includes a benchmark where corporate sukuks can be linked. And in this country, we still hope that we shall have a sovereign. And we cannot expect a soon sovereign sukuk, but we have this fund and large corporations. And sukuk does not involve banks, but specific corporations. And they organize the flow of finance. So can we involve companies, but it's going to be a partisan situation, because when we made this roadshow for several corporations in the Mid East and the Southeast Asia market, we did not observe any wish to lend money to the Russian corporations and then cut themselves and become subject to sanctions. So there was no big wish to do so. So the customers are not very much ready to buy our sukuk. Yes, there is interest, but is the Russian market ready to go to those markets to borrow money under the best and attractive projects? Внешэкономбанк will not conceal the fact that they want to find corporations with great assets to go to the markets and borrow. Unfortunately, not yet. So this again bespeaks the corporate situation in this country. We need to work with corporations because many of them even cannot prepare the proper documentation, and so they cannot create documentation. And speaking about sukuk, we should be probably considering a 5 years period. So say Akbar's bank in 2011 and 2013, they raised $65 million for N rate at N rate, and 100 in several years was N-2 rate. So others who will follow suit will find it easier because they set the track. And the private corporations that we know and who would like to attract this money have many questions. If the state plans to venture into this market, we should start with good, strong corporations like Russian Railways with good assets, who have assets in Russia and in other countries like Rosatom also. So these should be benchmark projects, jewels of business who will attract the attention to our market. And today we can confirm that Islamic banking structures don't have sukuk on their agenda. Thank you, Renat. If you let me, we shall pass the floor to our colleague from Dagestan, Said Saidov. Yeah. I would like to thank you, some 3 minutes, the organizers and the representative of the Central Bank and Ministry of Finance. I may sound quite surprising, but we opened Islamic window in 2008, and maybe you didn't get our letters, but we were writing to the Central Bank, and the Central Bank of Russia somehow they would not reply. And we started with the Council of Muslims of Dagestan and Institute of International Relations. So there was a small group. I was deputy chairman on developing Islamic banking, and we first made a study of the existing product in a bank, and then we got 8 to 9 certificates that allows us to launch this Islamic window. So we opened a branch completely in accordance with the current legislation, and this branch broke even in 10 months. So we place special banking cards up to 25,000 units, pieces of those cards. And but unfortunately, the banking license was withdrawn later, but not because of this office activity. We were writing to the central bank, so we suggest introducing financing of individuals and consumer loans. So that's exactly what we require. We have shown, we have proven the procedure to the central bank, and they confirmed that it does not contradict the current legislation, and we reached the turnover of some 8 million rubles, and so this office was very efficient. It worked, but unfortunately we didn't get any public or state support. And Leonard can confirm. He's a deputy counselor of Prime Minister, and I'm just another, an NGO chairman of the board. And there are many ways which we try to develop, and let me speak about the Duma deputies and senators and other people. I believe that manipulation of confession like Orthodox, Islamic, probably should be put aside. Why don't we call it alternative financing? Why, when we make this expert council, probably it's better to include something like in Russia we have two main Islamic schools, Shafi'ite and Hanafi, and we have representatives from them. When we have experts, we have correspondence, and the Council of Mufti gave us all the approvals, and the Islamic University confirmed that we are doing right. So when we describe the process of a deal, first, to get a proper answer, you need to ask a proper question. And Tatarstan here and the spiritual board in Russia allows us to. So we can just we can even invite the representative of the Russian Orthodox Church. It doesn't matter how the law is named, but the procedure that would be adequate for Muslims, for Orthodox, for the Christians, whoever they are. So that could be a universal tool. That would be just a special law, If the bank is happy, the clients are happy, why not? And even some atheists can use it, even if they don't believe. Atheists, that usually it's the rights of the believers that are being sacrificed, in the first place. I think we need to compare the products for the consumer. Why Islamic banking product is more important? Because unfortunately there is no insurance agency or something like that behind it. And financial house and other companies and financial structures are now have to put in all the efforts to develop these procedures. So the yield of on the deposits, so the people invest, the people is quite good. Is the same from 12 to 14% per annum, and the economic efficiency of is obvious, and I believe to make the legislation better, we need to collect the critical mass of such structures who have to show that indeed there's demand for this type of activity, and the PPP is very much advanced. As soon as ministers, for instance, express their interest in something like private-public partnership, it gets a good kick from them. But I know I cannot get to the ministers, so that's why I'm asking you to go and use your position and lobby this matter. We all want to be successful, and I wish you every success. And Murat Iskerov, who is head of financial company, so he was asking. He is now performing a Hajj, and he could not come. That's why, but he is sending his best regards, and I thank you for your attention. So let me comment. And we have a special expert council under the Committee on Financial Market. We call it Partnership Council, and we invite everyone there, and confessions and religions and whatever it is, up to the Buddhists, you know. So it takes care of all the confessional specifics. So, and there is a working group on developing partnership banking in Russia. So what you were asking for already exists, and we just need to expand it. And the believers or atheists and confessions, well, whoever you are, you can find understanding among those working groups. We are approaching the final moment of our session, so I can allow 2 minutes, and then we have a small event. After that, we shall close down. Yes. Yes, definitely. A small event. So speaking about the price of Islamic financial services, again, we should not be looking into the past. Let's look into the future. But speaking about what Hamzat said, indeed, several years ago, structuring the sukuk deals was much more expensive than traditional bonds. But today, according to the feedback of the market players, there's virtually no difference, very little difference. As for the price for the services in our domestic market for retail products in Islamic banking, we do not need to ignore the fact that the interest rate, the revenue that the borrower should pay to the bank, even the payment for the loan is higher than the average on the market. In the market, the client has a number of benefits compared to an ordinary conventional bank, like fines or restructuring if difficulties arise. And so ethical and religious basis of the Islamic banking creates sufficient advantages for the client, or some kind of remuneration in case of distress. That was my comment. For sukuk, would you recommend today asset-banked or asset-based, or what can we do with true sale, absence or presence of it, and some Sharia doubts of asset-based procedures. As I mentioned, asset-backed by Russian issuer, I can explain, when you have a specific asset and you have confirmation of your title from sukuk holder to this asset. So far, it is difficult to arrange because in the Russian legislation, you cannot make a link between the asset and the title to sukuk holder. The only alternative is asset-based, when you use the right as it is, as a base, the rental payments, the right to rental payments, to some income. This is going to serve as a basis to issue assets or certificates that will be
issue certificates that could be later employed as a financial instrument. So what we have, so let me explain. So you mentioned correctly that certainly that's so the Sharia, and it's certainly questionable how can we apply it, but we have different councils, Sharia councils, and the approach is quite different. And the issuance of Ahili, and so all the biggest issuances that we had in Sukuk, not necessarily so there were announcements so that there is a contradiction to Sharia, not necessarily Sharia contradiction issues. So then Alice Mani, the leading Sharia scientist, says that in spite of the fact that I have my doubts that about certain sukuks, but if fatwa was issued, if sukuk took place and the Muslim scientists issued a fatwa, so we cannot just we cannot retroactively change this deal. It's impossible. If provided Goldman Sachs, the issue may have failed to take place because the Sharia scientists, so that who were on the council, they have not provided a fatwa. So it's not just whether the scientists agreed or not. So I'm not going to say that we're going to do the state suku and then turn to the scientists. So first you go to the scientists and then you show them the structure and you tell them what you think about it. There should be just a respectable, prominent scientists in Malaysia or the United Arab Emirates who are respected in the world because they've done a lot of deals. And so if we get this fatwa, then within the framework of this fatwa we do the issuance. That's it. So, but it's a very specific niche case in each deal. Okay, we're wrapping up. So we are, and so then the thing is, so the last council, expert council at the National Rating Agency, so then identified the experts who made the biggest contribution to development of Islamic finance in Russia, and I am honored on behalf of NRA to offer these diplomas. So the expert council, so financial, so the national rating agencies awards the deputy of the State Duma Dmitry Savelyeva for a great personal contribution for the cause. So great work has been done. We'd like to thank you. So please don't stop. Continue your effort. Thank you for your kind words and for the evaluation of my effort. Thank you. Now, the next award, so the Expert Council on the issues of finance at NRA awards, so the Council Prime Minister of Tatarstan, Linara Yakupova, for the wonderful, great contribution that he's made. And so please keep up the good job. We are honored to award you for your effort. And one last award in our awarding ceremony. So we'd like to award another. So then there is that's obvious work, and there is a kind of under the surface of the water work, and it's kind of the work that has been going on for many years, and in a less open and obvious manner. But a great deal of work. So then the issue of so then there's the NRA just the awards. So the head of the Madim Hamulina for the wonderful effort, for the great contributions in the area of Islamic finances. So first, IOFIS standards, the translation of those standards into Russian, publishing them in Russia. and the follow-up implementation. There's a amendment, update of all those ratings and all these efforts in IOFI and representing the interests of Islamic banking, Islamic finance in Russia, and Russia participating, Russian development of the standards. And I think this is a great effort. Thank you. And the award goes to the lady.
Кончились. Александр Порфирьевич.
Так, меня назначили за неприятности.
And so then have a good evening. Just let me very quickly just wrap up. First point. It is true that the subject matter of Islamic banking, Islamic, so it's not something that was invented just a few days ago. It's been around for a long period of time. And so Renat Yakubov just has been dealing with this issue for 15 years, and oh, you're here, so you've been involved in this subject in the Russian Federation jointly with Mr. Markhanov just for many years. So another person who took the initiative of continuing to making these valuable contributions to the workings of the council and so very important issues that have been touched upon and followed through upon. So this continuous effort is very highly valued. And so now, another point. It's not related to sanctions directly. So we were beginning just to look for the other financing only because we are being pressed by sanctions. No, not that. Because it's related because the matter is ripe, the time is ripe, and because we certainly had an illusion that once we introduce the financial banking and then the money will come and flood. So this is not true. So the money will not come and flood, hasn't come and flood, and this I'm not going just to mention this person. So a member of the Council of Federation. So he went to France, to one of the Muslim countries. So he ate a lot of candies and sweet things and tea, but no one gave me money anyway. That's it. And one atheist, one Jewish guy, one Muslim, they got set together, just discussed things, just had some drinks, and then they figured it out and they started their financing process, and it's possible. And now so there are many processes that are going on, and there's about 15% of the population of Russia is a Muslim population. It's 21 million Muslims, and this proportion will continue to change, and we need to realize so then it will change in favor of the Muslim population because the birth rate is much higher in the Muslim community than the Russian community. That's why it changed. And the banking community, so they need to find ways, the new niches, new opportunities, new means, new products, financial products, and so then Graf was saying that so we are not going to compete we're competing with the chains that actually we're competing. So we're competing with the companies that actually will lead to the fact that eventually the banks will be superfluous. They will not be needed. So the Malaysian experience is very good. So that's why we're competing with the institutions. So we have more Muslims than in Malaysia. But the concentration of Muslims is not a determining factor. So then 4 days ago, I came back from Iran, and so I went there as a tourist, just an ordinary tourist. And I can, by the way, so I can recommend it for you, I can promote. So to compare what they write about this beautiful country and what I saw, Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, so lots of bank, lots of signs, lots of banks. And I was asking, so lots of Islamic banks, he said less than half. So 98% of the Muslim population in this 77 million country. So then Islamic banks, not many, they don't dominate. Or I got this impression, even in the so then Islamic banking dominate? No, I don't think they dominate. But anyway, so less than half of Islamic banks. And I would agree with the expert that because we're afraid that we can just build a cathedral, but there will be no praying people around. So that's why we need to prove that it will work, because we can invest a lot, but there may be no demand. So artificial to create it through the central bank and just put it through the parliament and work and iron out all the legislation, put it all in place and put it on place on the ground, and then no one will come. So what's the point? And but if you certainly, so if we don't do it, so then someone else will do it. So once if there is an instruction, if there is a resolution, then we'll act on it. And then owing to such people as Linar Yakubov and others, owing to people like you, Mr. from Dagestan, so it will come through anyway. So it will. But we need just to stop talking and to stop doing things. Because it's a central bank, so there's a special group. They set it up. Simonovsky. So then another deputy. So they're dealing with this, and so we have a special group, working group within the framework of the central bank. So which is going to dedicated to this issue, and so that's why eventually, so the seeds will sprout. And they will come through the ground and start to grow, and this is just so you remember that joke. There's one person who a religious person and he was saying, yes, I used just to go, I was educating people, so let me win the lottery at least once, but at least go and buy a lottery ticket and then you will win. Yes, although he was saying that he was very religious and spent all his life praying to God. So God said, so buy a ticket, then you would have won. And so we need to help each other, and we need to make every effort. So then my personal viewpoint, so if anyone has doubts that the central bank will put up barriers, slow down this process, will be marking time, so this is not true. We won't do that. We won't put up any barriers. We're not going to slow you down. And so we are on the part of the law and the initiatives that make sense, that are logical, and so we're not going to counteract this effort. And but this is my personal view. That's my personal point. And because I traveled far and wide, and I should say that I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic we'll have these products. So we call them Islamic banking, Islamic finance. So the future is there. The future is there. Inshallah. Inshallah.